Hello, my name is Chris Thomas. Welcome to my channel. It's been a year since I've done a video. I've been very busy, and but people have been asking me to do an update. I know a lot of YouTube channels, they're always doing updates, and but this will be packed with stuff. As you can see the list here, I'll be covering this list of subjects, and first I want to go into I'll go into some dynamics about the pole shift. So we know lots of things have been happening. There's been big changes in the world, and albeit sociological, but also geological and weather-wise and oceanic-wise, atmosphere-wise. So gone are the days when, you look up and you see, we'll cover an image of Planet X back in 2009, 2010. We'd see a second sun object floating next to the sun at a 4 o'clock position. It was wow. Okay, that was a picture of planet. That was an image of Planet X. I'll go into how to make sure you're looking at an actual picture or an image of Planet X and not a lens flare or some kind of a reflection or something, or a ghost image. But now we've got the tail of Planet X is sweeping close over Earth, its extremities, more and more often, bringing it's closer. Planet X is clearly closer, is gaining on Earth, and so I'll be getting into that. So, but what I was going to was the fact that we've got many more different sighting anomalies, genuine sighting anomalies. The passing of a planet in front of a moon, Planet X moon, in front of a camera, is just amazing stuff. And the monster persona has been around for quite a while, so we'll get into that. But first, so as far as the introduction is concerned, yeah, that's about it. I want to make sure, so it might be some new people watching this video and may not know me, and which is, so I've been writing and reporting now since about 2008, and now I've got into my safe location work because nobody was doing it. I mean, you can read about it, terrific stuff on Zeta Talk. But what I found is that a lot of people have to find it just too much for them to sort out. And I didn't seem to have a lot of trouble with that. So, and coupled with the fact that anyone that I've seen on the YouTubers, basically YouTube, was talking about safe locations, I'm like, well, that's way too broad. That's way too general. People can't, that's not going to help a person. A person needs coordinates. They need to know factors of safety. There's, I think I counted 6 safety factors for a safe location that all stack up on top of each other, and they all have to be on top of each other in a line. In other words, you have to have all these safety factors in place before you can call a coordinate a safe location. So I'll get into that. So, but as far as Planet X and Earth and their brief meeting causing a pole shift, I'd like to just explain a couple of things. First of all, Earth has a third magnet. 10,000 mile long uh, mountain range under the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic is narrow and the Pacific is massive. There's a reason for that. I'll get into that in a bit. Now, with each pole shift, the Atlantic widens with this rift in between. So this rift opens up, magma comes up from the chambers below and cools and created this heavy mountain range. Heavy because it's full of iron, because magma has a lot of iron in it. So it's become magnetized, of course, as it cools. It aligns to the various magnetic poles. So you have a variety of magnetic orientations throughout the entire length of it. But it does act as a magnet. And in fact, this is what actually causes rotation stoppage, which is written about in antiquity. So, in other words, if we didn't have the mid-Atlantic ridge, Earth would continue to rotate throughout the pole shift. The days would continue. And then 1 hour, it would happen, boom. So, but we're going to explain what's happening, what's going to happen this time. In prior passages, I believe the last pole shift, right now the North Pole is somewhere around the magnetic north, which is really the key issue. It's not the geological spin axis north pole. We're talking about the magnetic north and the magnetic south. These is somewhere in here. This is what causes the pole shift, because Earth is very magnetic, but Planet X is massively more magnetic and much more denser and has a powerful gravity field. Anyways, so we've got this mid-Atlantic ridge. So obviously, as Planet X approaches, passes within, Zeta Talk tells us about, I think it's 15 million miles beyond the moon, obviously. Actually, a long ways beyond the moon, from the farther out than the moon. So what happens is, as the days run down, the last couple of months before the pole shift, Earth begins to dramatically slow down, slow its rotation. So it's a certain point where Earth just comes to a halt right there, rotation-wise, and just pauses there, because the the mid-Atlantic ridge locks on to the magnetic field of Planet X. That's what causes it to stop. So it just sits there like a deer in the headlights, and for, what is it, 6 days, a little over 6 days. At the end of the 6th day, we have Planet X close enough to snatch the south pole of Earth. So it's down there like that, and I don't have a picture here of Planet X, but Zeta Talk tells us that it increasingly has been pointing its North Pole at Earth. So North Pole, South Pole. So it gets close enough, and in fact, as it's getting closer, it's actually speeding up, because it's rising and gaining speed, leaving the solar system. So on February the 4th, 2023, it grabs hold of the South Pole and gives it a pull-up, like that. Now what happens is, when that happens, before that happens actually, we have a lot of continental movement. You've seen all kinds of earthquakes around the world. That is all the fault lines are becoming kind of loosened up, and they're adjusting to, because what's happening, you see, is every day as Earth rotates in front of Planet X. Remember, again, this is complex. I hope you're able to follow me. Planet X, or Nibiru, is sunward. That's why they call it the second sun. It's just the way it comes into the. Well, I'll cover that in a bit. So, every day, it comes to a slowdown as it's passing in front of approaching Planet X, and then so what happens is that the eastern side of the mid-Atlantic ridge wants to keep rotating, but on the west side of the mid-Atlantic ridge it's held back, so there's a stretch here. So this whole area is stretching open. This whole range is stretching open. So what happens is that, of course, that push eastward, or that pull eastward, ricochets around the globe, all the fault lines, and forcing them to move against each other. So that's what causing all the earthquakes, essentially. Another thing, of course, is that because of the rotation of Earth and the fact that let me get it up right here, the North Mag, let's look down on Earth, is offset from the North Pole, from the spin axis. So what happens is that the North Mag actually scribes a circle. So as the Earth comes around and exposes the North Mag to the Sun, I can't make it right. So what happens then? The Earth wants to bob away, because that's the North Mag facing Planet X's North Pole. Remember, it's sunward, right? So what you've got is this wobble as it's rotating. So you got that going on too, and also, you know, there's a lot involved. But also on the Pacific side, the Eastern Pacific, that's the other half of that's the other opposite side of the Mid-Atlantic ridge. Also has, because of the way magnetrons work, also has a hold down. So there's a double whammy every day, and then on top, as I said, on top of that, you've got the wobble. So you've got all this going on. Very complicated. So what happens then is that all the connections, as I've said, between the continental fault lines become loosened up. So when the pole shift occurs, like so, and we know it's a 90-degree, number one, because the zetas have calculated that, and number two, I know it because I've had people write to me of their visions and soul travel experiences where they've seen movement of Earth that I've looked at and analyzed it, but what they've told me, and it aligns with a 90-degree tip. And that's a permanent tip. So when that upward pull happens, the Earth's magnetic core moves independently. So what happens is that this Earth's liquid magma center outside of the solid core creates kind of a lubrication. So when that happens, you're going to get, I calculated, I think it's about frankly, it calculates out at about 6,000, 5,000 miles split. Now I know it's hard to believe, but that's what it seems to calculate out. So you'll have continents in different locations than you'd otherwise expect. It's not going to be that obtuse, but on a global scale, it's pretty darn obtuse. So it's a very intense event. So that's essentially what happens. So we end up like this, and then I believe we'll still be orbiting in the same east-west rather west to east, like so. So that's a basic overview of what happens. Now, there's a lot of disinformation out there on the internet. Some people have the idea that Planet X is behind the sun, or you see people pointing to deep space, some color, some star, and a red star, and deep space, deep black space, right? Way out in deep black space, and saying it's Planet X or Nibiru, or some moon of Nibiru. Ugh. Planet X has been in the solar system since 2003. It's not out in deep space, so don't believe that stuff. Anybody who's touting that, who's talking about that, pointing at out in deep space at this star and that star, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't. So, we have a model so again, this is December 25th, 2003. This is when Planet X arrived next to the sun, whipping in from below the ecliptic. Like this, follow the cursor like that. Came to an abrupt slowdown, and it's been creeping past the sun on a straight line, basically a straight line course, like that. I'll do it again. Basically on a straight line course, but very slowly. So at the time, Earth was merrily going along in November, but in late November, it finds a massive planet sitting near its gravitational, near its orbital track. So Earth had to come to a stop. Now, what is it? It's not going to run into it, because we have not only do we have gravitational forces, but we have repulsion forces. That's what keeps them apart. And because Planet X is slowly advancing, Earth has to slowly back up. Now this brings up the whole subject of a stopped Earth. Now, that's in my book, which I'll get to. So Earth slowly backs up like that. For 17 years, it's been doing this. Its normal orbit is like this. Like so. So it backs up, so we have a straight line. This is not to scale, this is just to give you the idea, a straight line path like that, only it is actually on an upward angle. So it's something like this. Okay, something like this, 32-degree angle, according to Zeta Talk. And I'm not going to argue with them. I believe in them, because everything they say has excellent physics behind it, if you study and know physics. So, Earth is backing up. Now, whether you believe that or not, it doesn't matter, because I'll get into that with the blue Kachina. That's coming up. So naturally, Earth moving backwards on an arc and an interloping brown dwarf star passing through in a straight line, the two have to intersect. It's already intersected on the December 25th, 2003, but now they're going to intersect, right? Like that. So what happens at that point, that is the time of the pole shift. Now they don't touch, but Planet X passes overhead, as I was indicating earlier. So that's the rough basics of the situation. Let's get back to my presentation. So, about 2018, I think it was. 2019, early. I had somebody contact me, a Facebook person, said you should be writing a book, because I've been doing a lot of writing on different things and uploading it to my Facebook group and stuff like that, and my blog. So I thought, okay, yeah, good idea. I should write a book on waking dreams. So I started writing on waking dreams, and it's like after a while I thought, well, hold it, which is more important? They're both important, but I think a book on a pole shift is more important. I know there's other books have been written about the pole shift, but I thought I could bring my own perspective to it, which I've been doing. So that book is at 60,000 words right now. Okay, the New Madrid and European Tsunami. This is a map I drew up. It's actually an image taken from an interactive map that I'll release at some point, but I wanted to introduce it in this video. I took every reference I could find in Zeta Talk and hand drew these lines according to what they described. So this is the massive network of fault lines that'll adjust during the big New Madrid event, which is my point here. Now I'm going to pop over to the progress of Planet X timeline briefly here. So Zeta Talk has given us these sequences of events that must occur before the pole shift. So starting with India sinking and the sinking of the Sunday plate of the maritime South Pacific island nations, and then it progresses around the globe in a sequence. So here we have the Japan quakes. So if you're worried about the New Madrid, then you should be looking for, watching for the Japan quakes. And it's split into two: North Island, and a few weeks later or a few days later, the South Island. Once that happens, then the next in line is the New Madrid, right here. And for the European tsunami, of course, that's number 10. That's when the plates split here, creating a hole in the ocean, in the ocean floor, and that throws a big wave towards northern Europe. Okay, so the thing is, Zeta Talk has been talking about a New Madrid happening last fall. And so that set a lot of people abuzz, thinking that the European tsunami, as we know, 9/10, would be right after it. And a lot of people are not prepared. Here, it's only 2020. So now, the Zetas never actually said that it would take place in the fall of. Oh, they did. Sorry, they did. It's the sighting of Planet X being obvious in January. This right now. That was surmised by what do you want to call it? The deep state, the government, the CIA, or whatever you want to call it. They surmised that, and the Zetas were only echoing it. They didn't actually say it, but that I'm off topic. So they did say, yes, that there would be a New Madrid kickoff or a New Madrid adjustment this last fall. It didn't happen. So so enter the Utah monolith, which is a only one of probably very many that were put down in remote situations. Yes, we know that there were some that were fake and this and that, but this is a real event. These were placed to slow the continental shifting in the central U.S. And so when you look at the earthquakes for North America, I should have had a map for that. But if you Google that for 2020, apparently there's been a dearth of earthquakes for the central U.S. So they are taking up the strain. However, the brakes have to come off at some point. So obviously that'll be happening in the next few months. So we can expect a new Madrid occurring in the next few months. Now, will it be like the massive one? No, because we're not in the last months before the pole shift. And besides, India's got to sink first. So what's happening is that in my opinion, the Zetas are talking about a kickoff, a start. And earthquakes, they fault lines, they move in increments, and then they'll give, and then they'll have an earthquake will happen, and then it'll hang up, and then it'll be, and then another time passage, and then it'll be another pressure buildup, and then boom, it moves again, right? That's the way it works. And it's moving towards the big adjustment. So the first adjustment from my sources are saying that it'll be fairly severe, but it can't be impossible to be the big one. So you have time. You still have time. Now, if you're living, in Tennessee and Kentucky and Alabama, or whatever, and Mississippi, and you want to traverse these areas, getting a safe location, that's another story. That's another story. Because this one coming up, the starter, the big starter, is likely to down quite a few bridges and trigger military checkpoints and stuff like that. So now's the time, if you're looking for a safe location in this area, is to get as close to that safe location while you're looking, so there's a minimal amount of bridges to none between you and your proposed safe location. This is where safe location consultation comes in, and talk about all the strategies you got to come up with. And there's also a lot of intuition and waking dream stuff I introduced into that. So it also depends on the person who's doing seeking too. So that's a consultation thing. So that's what I wanted to say about the New Madrid European tsunami situation. That we're still early, but there is going to be one. But people in Northern Europe should not worry about a European tsunami coming this. In my opinion, it won't happen this year. It can't. So now let's back up a little bit here. Yeah, okay. So now I want to talk about the timeline. No, we're going into the update, into safe location overview. This is an image taken of my map as it is right now. It's not quite finished. I've got to do Oregon and Washington yet, and Alaska and Hawaii. Yeah. So this is just a snapshot the actual map will be zoomable. You can zoom right in, right down, and you can down to a town or a road. You can zoom in and out. So I took all the Zeta Talk information and I put it on the map. Some of it was intuitive, like for example, this area right here. Now I'm pretty certain that's the Columbia River. Anyways, it divides Oregon and Washington. There's so much water coming down from Canada that from broken dams during the pole shift that it's going to spill out like that. So being near a river is probably a death sentence, especially the Columbia, because you've got in the U.S. you've got, I haven't done the count, but I know, and for example, in Utah, it has 117 reservoirs. So all the reservoirs in the world are going to break. They can't withstand. They're going to at least crack, right, and leak. And that's a worse situation, because what happens? You've got a couple living, a community living within 100 or 200 feet of a river. Maybe they're 50 feet up from the river, and they're using it for a water source in the aftertime. And there's a big old dam upstream that's just trickling. So one day that dam is going to give away, and you're going to be down washing your clothes, and there's going to be a big river tsunami come up and carry you away. So that's the danger of after-time locating near a river in the aftertime. Creeks, you're probably more threatened with mud flows or flooding. But any type of a river is just far, far too dangerous, because it become a roaring torrent during the pole shift. And not only that, but you'll have spillovers from the bank of unimaginable amounts of water in these dams. And it's just not, it's RVs and it's people, it's dogs, it's an awful mess coming down the river. And houses and gasoline and you name it will be coming down the river. So stay away from the river, stay away from the lake, a bog area, and don't be close or down elevation from a nearby lake or man-made lake or any freshwater body at all, because they're all going to cause massive problems, and worse is, what you don't want is a massive rogue moving water. In other words, a river that has been blocked by a landslide, though that's going to happen. So what happens is it fills up, and then the water spills over. Now you got a river going in a new direction, right? And if it's like the contents of a dam, well, then that's a moving lake through the landslide, through your landform, right? You imagine a million, maybe 20 kilometers of fresh water, 20 square kilometers of fresh water, pushing over a riverbank and flowing into a valley at high speed. You just don't want to be in a low area. It's just too dangerous. Now, a lot of that will settle out after a few weeks. But still, as I said, you don't want to spend a lot of time near a river in the aftertime. So that's just some ideas, some of the things I look for when somebody says I want to locate here. I look at that kind of thing. Of course, there's other factors as well. So I wanted to touch on that. Oh well, yes. The moving north magnetic pole. It's spawned the the pole flip lie. The pole flip concept is that Earth's poles will switch positions, which is the most ludicrous concept that I can imagine if you have any understanding of physics at all. So if you take a bar magnet, there's a north pole and a south pole on it. I don't ever remember anyone reporting that the north suddenly became a south, and the south switched over to the north. It's because the molecules in the iron are bonded and oriented to their different directions, which creates the magnet and the magneton flow from the south through the center of the magnet and out through the top of the north pole and around in an arc and back into the south. That's the way it works. They don't flip. So now let's talk about the ludicrous, ridiculous concept of Earth flipping its poles. Let's go back to that model. Okay. So Earth cannot independently switch its poles. If that was to happen, then the sun would object, because the sun is the dominant magnet in the solar in the solar system. The sun has what they call a magnetosphere, and that magnetosphere is goes way out beyond the solar system, like that. It's called a magnetosphere. So the sun is dominating that entire our entire solar system with its magnetic field, with the north at the top and the south at the bottom. Now, back about 10 years ago, 9 years ago, they sent out, they being NASA, sent out a probe called Ulysses. And I remember reading about it because Nancy at Zeta Talk had mentioned it. And so I went to the page and I read that that they'd found that they did not find any. They were looking for an excuse for. Well, at any rate, they found that North indeed did have one North Pole and one South Pole, like any other magnet in the universe. Natural magnet. So I read the page on Ulysses, and sure enough, that's what they said. Now, I went back, I can't remember what it was, whether it was writing my book on it or something. I think it was about my book. And I went to find that same page. Of course, it'd been altered. And now they're saying that Ulysses found that the sun has several North Poles and several South Poles. And that was the pretext for the pole flip lie. But it's just a ridiculous thing, because if the Earth cannot independently flip its poles, because the sun would have to flip first. So if the sun was to rotate its poles, flip, then all the magnetic planets not all planets are magnetic, by the way, in the solar system would also flip their poles. Now, that can't happen either, because the sun is part of a Milky Way galaxy, which is a massive, unbelievable system of magnetic interactions. So there's a harmony, a magnetic harmony throughout the entire galaxy. So for Earth to flip its poles, the sun would have to flip its poles, and then so it would have to start at the galaxy center, the galaxy suns. They would have to flip their poles, and on and on. So as you can see, even if they did flip the poles, the whole Milky Way galaxy would roll over, and then Bob's your uncle, nobody's going to know nothing about it. It's just a complete ridiculous lie. So please don't believe in the pole flip lie. So much. So in my book, I plotted the movements of the North Mag, and I built a graph, and you'll see that by the graph in my book that the movement of the North Mag is about the approach of Planet X into our solar system. So that's what it's about. So, seeing the blue Kachina. Now, the story about the blue Kachina is quite large, as most of the stories around Planet X are. Well, to start with, this is a genuine catch of the blue Kachina. This was taken by a Facebook friend who lives in India. And I've expanded it here. You can see its little dark orb during the high in the sky during the sunset. So he took this himself. He saw it with the naked eye, and he took this photograph. So let's talk about what the blue Kachina is. Zeta Talk calls it the Earth's dead twin, or EDT. So I'm going to explain some physics around it, and then we'll get into the Hopi tradition, which the name blue Kachina comes from. This model here just simply shows Earth on its old orbital track, soon to be old orbital track. The new one will be somewhat like this, obviously. So what happens if you had a moon that was accompanying Planet X, which has many moons accompanying him, the corpus Nibiru, Planet X, as it moves in its sling orbit between our sun's binary twin and our sun, back and forth. So what would happen if one of the moons were to be dislodged from its gravitational pull with a relationship with Nibiru, and gets tangled in a close pass near Earth and gets drawn into the orbital path of similar or the same orbital path as Earth? And why would that happen? Why would it be a moon of Nibiru, which is, I believe I read it, but it's my feeling that that's what it is. EDT, that's what it is. So in prior passages of Planet X through the solar, it's thousands of passages, it's created all kinds of havoc in our solar system. It created through planetary collisions, it created the asteroid belt. Earth was struck by a moon. That's in my book. That's from Zecharia Sitchin and his work with the cuneiform tablets made by the Sumerians 6,000 years ago, roughly. which was heavily, heavily, heavily influenced by the Anunnaki who live on Planet X. It's a whole other story. We're not going to go there. So, a moon, I believe, of Planet X escape and become drawn into the sun's gravity and fell into orbit, Earth's orbit. Why? Because it's almost the same mass. So orbits are based on a few things. I'm not a planetary scientist, but I've done the reading, and a great deal of influence on orbits is mass of the object, and of course the mass of the gravitational draw, or the sun in this case. So since it is confirmed by the Zetas that the EDT is the same size, roughly, as Earth, it means it has enough mass where it could easily take up the same orbital track around the sun as our. Now that's supposed to move. Why is that not moving? Okay. Oh, I see why. I forgot. Move it this way. Okay. So when you have two bodies, celestial bodies with a similar mass in the same orbital track, what's going to happen? Well, gravity and repulsion force will naturally sort out its position as being opposite that of the other one, in this case Earth. So when Earth is here, EDT is here, or the dark twin is called the dark twin, not to be confused with our sun's binary twin, which also happens to be an unlit sun collapsed. Here we're talking about EDT, the blue Kachina. So as Earth orbits around the sun in an anti-clockwise fashion like that, EDT must maintain a 180 degree position from Earth because of gravity and repulsion forces balancing them out, and that's just the way it works. So we never see EDT ever, unless, I can't say ever, there's only one thing that could cause EDT to be visible to Earth. And what would that be? Earth comes to a stop in its orbit track. Earth comes to stop. So Earth comes to stop because Planet X popped up from solar system south near its orbit, and it couldn't get around it. The forces that keep Earth in its orbital track is based on Earth's mass and relationship with the sun's mass. So that didn't change, did it? The sun's still there. Earth is still in her orbital track. So what's the force that's going to push Earth out of its orbital track, away and around? Not going to happen. Not going to happen. But you'll see in a minute. So because of the relationship between Earth and the sun and the gravitational balance between the two, Earth just came to a stop because it couldn't get around it. So it starts moving backwards, slowly. Meanwhile, EDT over here, say it was over here because it's 180 degrees opposite, kept rotating because it's not kept moving on its orbital track around the sun. So a few months later, after the Earth came to a stop and started moving very, very slowly backwards, EDT was merrily going along its orbit, and it came to a stop as well because its companion is standing in front of it. So what happened in 2004 is that EDT came around and found Earth in its way. So it has been dithering in the western sky ever since. And as Earth backs up a little bit, EDT has to back up a little bit. So what happens is that Planet X moves a little bit forward, Earth moves a little bit backwards, and so does EDT. So in a group, they're moving backwards. So now, so if you could zoom in on this, if you realize that Earth this doesn't show its orbit here, this rotational movement. Yeah, okay. Anyways, this is not working the way I wanted it to. But at any rate, I'm trying to think of the right words here. Okay. Okay. Earth. Wants to go counterclockwise, but it can't. So it's backing up. Now, when you look at Earth's movement like that, we call this the orbital segment behind Earth. The Earth is just passed over, right? So it's like that. That's the way it wants to move, like that. Now, that is the western sky. The eastern sky is the direction that Earth wants to move, but it can't. It can't. It's stuck. Nevertheless, this side of Earth's orbital track is the western sky, and this side is the eastern sky. So since we know that Earth came to a stop and EDT continued to orbit around behind Earth and found it stopped, it dithers in the western sky. So when you see EDT, and there's been lots of stuff on the internet of a genuine catch of the blue Kachina, that means that's guaranteed. There's no physics way around it. You might call this superplanetary physics, beyond the corporate pablum that the universities teach and the colleges and the schools teach us about the so-called solar system. It's all just pablum. They just want to keep you nice and quiet and making your grades and getting your papers done, and then go off and get the job and become like the famous comedian. I can't think of his name right now. He died a few years ago. What he said is they want obedient workers. Obedient workers, he says, just smart enough to do the paperwork and to run the machines, but not smart enough to do critical thinking. So they give you this pablum. It's just nice, easy to eat pablum. So the blue Kachina, the name comes from the Hopi tradition, and they say they have Kachina dolls. They make a doll. You ever seen a Kachina? I don't have a picture of one, but they make a little doll up, a beautiful little doll, and they have it for a wedding or for a funeral or for birth of a child or a natural event. So they make up, I'm not saying they make up a doll for every national event. I don't know natural event, but I know they make up dolls for natural events. And they have a doll for the appearance of the blue Kachina. It's called the blue Kachina. Why blue? Because it's a black dead planet, so it doesn't reflect any red light. So it's only seen between a gray to a, shall we say, about a yellow. So, or a blue. apparently. So that's why it's called a blue Kachina. And now the Hopi have a tradition that they say first comes the blue Kachina, then comes the red Kachina. So they have a doll for Planet X, which appears red in the sky when you see it. And you don't really want to see it too soon, do you? Right. So, but that's the case. First the blue Kachina, then the red Kachina. Again, more evidence that Earth comes to a stop before the pole shift, backs up, EDT comes around, encounters Earth, sitting there. So it's there now. The EDT is supposed to be at 180 degrees opposite Earth, is now sitting near Earth, dithering up there, maybe a million miles away from Earth, dithering around. It doesn't know what to do because Earth is in its way. Now, there's a great video on YouTube that Nancy put together of Zeta Talk. It shows the line of the interactions of Planet X as it moves through the solar system, and at some point EDT actually bobs around or comes around the outside of Earth and continues to orbit in the last weeks. That is in my calendar here, which I embedded in the calendar right there. So describes it. So calculated to be sometime in the second week of December 2022. So when you see blue Kachina in the eastern sky, you know we're going to be looking at the severe wobble, the 9 days of severe wobble. So it's all Zeta Talk information. It's all been embedded in the last week's calendar. So blue Kachina and the Planet X. So catches a Planet X. So how do you see the blue Kachina? You keep an eye out high in the western sky at sunset. That's how you see it. Now, seeing Planet X. These are genuine catches of Planet X. Here you can see a separate trail of light reflected on the water underneath this second light object, guaranteeing that to be an actual object and not a lens flare. So when you see that, it's a genuine catch of Planet X. Now in some cases it can be a moon swirl, a genuine, and it could be anywhere around the sun because of the way the tail moves around, right? And if the moon swirls get to the right angle, they reflect light down and they project what looks like an image, a catch of Planet X, but there would be no reflection. Well, let me see now. My mistake. There could be a reflection, of course, because it is real light coming down a light tube, but that's slightly off topic. What I want to get to is why people ask, well, why can't I see Planet X? Well, this is the way I like to put it. Let's say the Planet X is approximately 50 million miles away from Earth. Now, it may glow like that, and you may have what they call a monster persona, which we've seen those where it's a gravitational, it's a projection of Planet X by the gravitational field magnification, and it appears to be very large. That's another subject. That's another one of the fantastic anomalies we're seeing that are genuine coming up, right? Well, we've been seeing the monster persona now for years. Okay, so see, you have to realize that seeing Planet X with the naked eye, first of all, you're looking into the glare of the sun, so that's why sunset or sun up is the only time you can look in that direction. Usually you want to have a filter over what you look at the sun, but in some cases you can look at the sun, it's not too bright, and you can potentially see it with your naked eye. But you have to realize that you can't see it on a regular basis because the lighting has to be perfect. The perfect angle, the perfect light spectrum, and the conditions have to be stacked up to be perfect. So if you can think of, I would ask a question, can you see a fly 10 miles away? Because probably trying to see Planet X in the sky, if it was possible, if it wasn't near the sun, would be like really probably more like trying to see a fly 100 miles away, because the scale of distance and size. But you might be able to see a fly 50 feet, 75 feet away if you have good eyesight, just with natural eyesight. But it's like trying to see a fly 100 miles away. That's why it's hard to see Planet X, because of the scale and the distance, and why the lighting has to be perfect. So that's why it's very spotty. So we move on to an update on the Indo-Australian continent. What's all over the news is that Jakarta is being admitted as being sinking. Well, this started, the Zeta Talk predicted this in 2009, that it would, and it wasn't, what they were talking about was actually Pakistan. The Indus Valley was flooding, and that's part of the that's part of the Indus Valley would be here, right in there. So that's the down portion. The up is New Zealand and Australia. Now, I get a lot of people that write to me telling me their stories and their visions. And the really good ones are the visions, because they're good. I enjoy reading anyone's story, but when a person gets a vision, it's from soul, and it's true. So this gentleman I knew through email, he said that he lives somewhere near the outback over here, just to the west of the Blue Mountains, in there, like that. You can see that there. So he was sitting in his shop one day, his woodshed, and suddenly he became aware that he could see and feel beautiful, clear blue water coming in at his shop and filling up the shop to the point where he started to choke. So that was a vision. And so after a few minutes it went away, and the next day he was heading into town to get some food, I guess, and it happened again when he was driving his car. So he felt the Indian Ocean and building up around, sinking him, and he was having to hold his head up and choking. So he wrote me about this experience, and I said, "No, that's a premonition, a vision premonition of the fact that the Western U.S., that the Western Australia is going to go down under the waves." So the update would be simply that we know that this whole timeline is progressing to the pole shift, because we were getting actual admission from governments. There's many, if you run a search, you'll find many stories about Indonesia moving its capital to Borneo because it's sinking. Now another timeline. Okay, so I'm just importing this into the video here on the fly. I forgot to mention. I wanted to mention this because this is a great example of indicating that indeed we are moving along a timeline, because this is one of many photos that have been taken in China of the oily slick in the sky. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that the tail of Planet X is full of petroleum, which is why we have a lot of petroleum on Earth buried in great chasms. It's because of the thousands and thousands of passages of Planet X. It drops this oil right from the sky, right from the tail, right onto Earth, and it seeps into these crevices and becomes crude oil. So when you gas up your car, you remind yourself that you're pumping the tail of Planet X, the products from the tail of Planet X into your tank to run your motor. That's what's been driving it drives our economy for how many decades have been driven on gasoline. It's Planet X. You're running your car on Planet X. This is the oil slick from in the clouds of the sky, and that indicates that the tail is closer and the Planet X is closer. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things that I've entitled Most Important Things to Remember. I took that off my Facebook group. Somebody was asking. It's a good question. Just a variety of things that comes to my mind. So I'll just start with the first one. As I keep telling people, whatever's above ground is going to be destroyed. So you got to have buried somewhere, somehow contained underground, or somehow contained a high quality tent with water and food and blankets and cooking utensils and cooking fuel and that kind of cooking stove and all that stuff that you're going to need for the first few days or a week or maybe even for the first month of the after time, directly after the pole shift. That way you've got something to go to. So that also you should also have contained somewhere either the material to build a new abode or some type of prefab home that you can set up, and it'll be wrapped in very carefully wrapped and waterproof with plastic, that kind of thing. Some type of prefab home. What's been coming up are these cement bubbles that people with doors and windows in them that a lot of companies are promoting. I'm telling you, it's not going to survive an onslaught of boulders for an hour at hurricane speeds. It's just, they don't care how many times you hit something with a hammer, some concrete or some aircrete. It's going to be destroyed by the pole shift. I mean, we're talking potentially some small car-sized boulders. Okay, probably a lot of it will be smaller at hurricane speeds, and that's I believe that's Category 4 speeds, and tornadoes. So it's just not productive at all to try to set up a building to live in prior to the pole shift that will pass through the pole shift that could survive it. That's why they have bunkers. So if you build a house-sized bunker, it's potentially possible to do that. But that's a massive undertaking. Besides, where is your electricity going to come from in the after time? Unless you've got some serious battery inverters or portable power supplies to operate equipment to build this thing. After these things, it's better just to go with a prefab home or some type of a structure that you can, or maybe you've got tons of lumber, all nails and screws and stuff, all beams, all plywood, all stored for a build. That's another thing. But that's my suggestion. Also, food. Buy more food than you think you need. It's freeze-dried food, comes it's expensive, but or canned food, or just plain old beans in a bag, and rice, but buy more than you think you need, and make sure you've got enough water for the first few months in the after time too as well. Now here's something that's not talked about often, but that Earth does lose, if I'm not mistaken, the Zeta Talk said it was about 60% or up to 60% of the atmosphere during the pole shift, or less. I'm sorry, or more. So, and they say that the sea will build up the atmosphere. They didn't say how long. I believe 1 year might have been it, but I'm getting 6 months. For the first 6 months, you're going to have to be out of the sun. So you're lucky if you're getting some sun. But regardless of any type of sunlight you're getting, there's going to be a lot of UV, ultraviolet radiation within that sunlight. In fact, it'll be a killing amount immediately right after the pole shift. So, and most especially if you are in a high elevation. So, my thinking on that is that you work during the day, you work during the night, and you sleep during the day for the first 6 months. And you maybe want to have some type of a device that can measure ultraviolet radiation, wrapped up in a Faraday cage for the pole shift, so you can check on the amount of UV radiation as it gets less and less. Another thing would be to outfit your survival kits with obviously you're going to have a lot of first aid kits, fully fleshed out and fully populated with all the gear and the material and the medicines you could possibly think of. But besides that, lead testing kits for water. So they're not expensive. So I would get lots of those so you can monitor any lead, because apparently there's going to be a lot of lead in the water, certainly the rain carrying volcanic ash. And not only that, but even well water, because of the disturbance of the crust and the magma currents of moving closer to the surface. You could have lead in your drinking water, whether it be a well or a river or a lake or what have you. So lead testing kits. People always ask about, because typically it's one of a couple becomes pole shift aware and has got to convince the other couple, the other member, their partner, that there's a pole shift coming. So very often it's a mother and a child, or a single father or a single person asking about communities and seeking a community. And while that is absolutely understood, and it certainly is, like a community is a fantastic thing to have, to live in the aftertime, I would recommend being very, very careful about becoming part of a community, especially if they're asking for They're asking for investments. In fact, that would be a big red flag for me. And so I've always suggested that it's best to be a community of one first, or you know, you and your whoever's in your group, whether it's you or your son or daughter or your that initial group should be a community of one, and think of it that way. And it's just like building a raindrop in a cloud. Eventually, the raindrop is built from millions of little molecules of water that condense onto a grain of dust. So you draw your community into you, towards you, based on who you are. I know it's conceptual, but it starts with that, and it starts in the heart as well at the same time. Biggest danger is in the aftertime is moving fresh water and seawater, of course, but you're not going to allow that to happen because it's very clear that you don't want to be near the sea. But rogue moving freshwater bodies are very, very possible in the aftertime. So you got to make sure you don't have any water that is that can reach you at a distance. So you got to look at the surrounding landform to make sure that that reservoir or that dam, when it breaks, is not going to reach your location. And this is where I get into the safe location consultations that I do. That's what I look for the client to make sure. My best guess is that they're a good 200 or 300 feet above a river that would be and far enough away that would be safe enough of a distance from a river or lake, a bog, or a creek. Yeah. Now, one idea I had while writing my book was, people ask me, well, which direction will the wind be blowing in the aftertime? Well, obviously it depends on where you are, but essentially the west coast of North America, the winds will blow offshore. So blowing the volcanic ash away from North America along the west coast, because we know the west coast of North America has a lot of volcanoes that'll be going off. So it'll be moving in the direction of offshore, because North America the north rolls to become west. So we want to make sure that you are not north of a volcano. So that means, believe it or not, being west of Yellowstone. As we know, Yellowstone won't really be going off. It's just a disinformation point, because the magma conduits that supply the volcano or the volcanic field have long since cut off, because the west coast of North America is being pushed for millennia upon millennia to the east, and that chokes and cuts off the magma tubes supplying any volcano that would be remaining on the eastern side of the continental divide, which where Yellowstone is located. So if you locate west, not too close, of course, because it's going to pop and blow a little bit of ash and bubble a little bit of magma for a long time, but it won't be a big explosion. So if you're west of it, the west will become north, and the south is even better, because that'll become west. So there's a roll like that. And we also, of course, roll into a different. I say we because I'm on the Pacific. I'm in the Pacific of the Canada, off the west coast of North America. So well, actually, in my case, actually, Garibaldi and one or two other Baker are going to be blowing ash my way, but there's mitigating circumstances and it's going to change that a little bit for me. But anyways, so people ask about the direction of wind in the aftertime, and which reminds me of the fact that when you dig your trench for your pole shift survival, the trench typically is, we think of it as along a singular line dug in the into the ground. But I come up with the idea, what happens, well, we know that the winds are going to come from many different directions during the pole shift. There may be a trend, but the wind could shift easily. So if the wind shifts and the wind is blowing up your trench to your side, then and you haven't provided any wind block for the sides of your trench, then if you have an L-shaped trench or a V-shape or an arc-shaped trench, you could have the option of moving to a different part of the trench if the wind is blowing rock and dust into that part of your trench. So that was my idea to enhance your survival trench. So there's a few ideas I wanted to throw out, and yeah, so I hope that helps. So I think I covered quite a bit of stuff here tonight. So thanks for watching, and I'll probably do another update video in a few months or a while, but for sure I have to get working on my next video, which is my new safe location video for the USA, and what's going to happen to Indonesia and Malaysia and Borneo and all those maritime South Pacific island nations. So it's Chris Thomas signing off. Thanks very much for watching.